Thank you. Right, item 15, allocation of decision-making responsibilities for council-controlled organisations' activities coming in-house. I've got John and Shirley. That's definitely not John and Shirley. It's John and Alistair. You'll be pleased I knew the difference. Right. Who's going to lead off? John, is that you? Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Kia ora, members. Would you like me to give a brief summary of where this is at, Chair?
Please.
Yeah, kia ora. So the report is basically putting forward some recommendations for you to allocate decisions that are currently made by the Eki Panuku Board, and in the case of Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, the economic development decisions made by that board to either the governing body or local boards. The process for that is outlined in the report through the Auckland Council legislation, and these decisions relate to urban regeneration, economic development, and some property and marina matters. The main point, I guess, Chair, apart from the core content of the report, is that we have been around 21 local boards and we have resolutions from all the local boards. The majority of boards that have responded to the actual allocations are in support of those. Other boards have more tended to resolve on site-specific matters from the area or made pleas for additional support and advice to enable the new decision-making powers that they've got to be implemented. The only board that made any substantive opposition to the core changes is Waiheke, and their concerns are really related to the particularities of that community, some much wider matters that they would like additional authority to address, and those are being addressed through the Joint Governance Working Party in the coming meeting in July. So, Chair, that's pretty much where we're at on it. Kia ora.
Thank you, John. Al, do you want to add anything else?
Just briefly, the allocation decision making that we're asking you to approve basically follows through on the direction that the organisation received at the beginning of the annual plan process. We're looking at increasing local decision making and better decision making for council.
Okay, thanks. I'll open for questions. First question is, when the local boards say they want more support, what exactly do they mean by that?
Thanks, Chair. It's particularly around advice. So this follows a pattern where local boards have wanted to do a number of things, some of which are directly related to these changes, particularly around the property area, and for a variety of reasons haven't been able to access the advice that they need. So it's primarily around advice.
Supplementary to that, and so should we pass these recommendations, will that advice be forthcoming?
So, Chair, in the report you'll see that there's a variety of pieces of work underway to advance the advice issue around these particular matters, and some broader advice pieces that we're working through with the local board chairs at the moment. So we have said that the coming financial year is a transition year. We've got a number of structural changes around property, urban development and economic development that need to bed in. So our expectation is that as staff start to engage, in particular with local boards, the discussions around advice and support will come up and be addressed as part of that.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Ferry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question sort of follows on from yours, really. So some of that, at least, extra support around advice is going to fall with the more empowered local boards piece of work. Is that correct, John?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and so that's something that is coming to the Joint Governance Working Party on a regular basis as it sort of winds its way through, with recommendations going to parts of the council to respond to and back and forth and so on. Is that how that's happening?
Yeah, thanks. Through the Chair, yes, the Working Party, Joint Governance Working Party has worked through the more empowered approach for a number of months now, and ongoing advice is being prepared for that. As I said just briefly before with the Chairs Forum, so obviously there is discussion around the recent cost pressure issue, and that has raised the question of advice, and linked to that is the wider advice, not only about cost pressures, but the wider context here. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And has there been some consideration of what's going to happen for priority locations where there might be an impact on two local boards? I'm particularly thinking of Maungawhau, which is in one local board area, but very, very close to the boundary of another, and it has impacts across both of those. Is there any consideration yet for how that will be sort of worked through, or are we just going to sort of see how that goes?
Through the Chair, there is an implementation workstream stood up that's going to look into these questions. I mean, our expectation is that as staff come to local boards to update them on the programs that are in their area or close to the area, there will be some collaboration and cooperation involved in that, but the detail is still being finalised.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Look, I've got some of the stuff. This item was huge too, and I just wanted to understand. In the attachments, there was pages and pages with some strikeouts and changes. I'm on the right subject matter here, aren't I?
Yes, correct.
Yes. So I just some of it looked quite innocuous. Like there's one here just says proposed minor addition, move, deleted paragraph to the end of the allocation table. But that reads, the governing body and local boards have, I can hardly see it, have also made a general delegation of all their responsibilities, duties, etc., to the chief executive under financial limits. You know, when we're talking about empowering local boards, I was going through all this stuff and saw these strikeouts, and you get something like that. How are we empowering? What's the relevance of this here to the comments that is in the long-term plan at the moment that we're heading towards an empowerment of local boards?
Kia ora, through the Chair. So that particular reference, Councillor, you'll see there that the editor's moving the struck out paragraph to the end of the document, so it's not being removed, it's just being moved. And this is an example of a minor edit where we've rearranged the places of some of those things for clarity. But to your wider point about more empowered local boards, I think it's fair to say that the process by which we are recommending allocation of a number of decisions on these programs to local boards is a reflection of the more empowered approach. And I guess the wider discussion, Councillor, on advice and support is the area that there have been gaps and concerns expressed about before to actually enable local boards to implement those wider powers that they have.
Okay, I've just learnt the importance of that word delegation over the years, and I look at this clause. I understood it was moving to the end of all this, but I'd gone through all these pages of stuff and then thought, good heavens, a simple clause like that makes the rest of it irrelevant. Am I grossly misled saying that?
As I said, Councillor, we're moving it to the end. It doesn't, from staff perspective, alter the implications and the importance of that item.
So the implications have been that I'm correct. Ever since we've been talking this stuff, ever since that clause has been in here, in reality, we have a little paragraph there that allows staff and the chief executive to just manage everything as they want. Like we're the governing, The governing body and local boards have also made a general delegation of all their responsibilities, duties, and powers to the bureaucrats. Is that the right way to read it?
I
got some legal
don't think
advice.
so, Councillor.
Yeah.
I see learned legal counsel coming to the table, so I might get her to explain it.
Thank you, Councillor Turner, for that question. So that particular note at the end of the allocation table, that is not a delegation to staff. That is just there as an explanation. That delegation already exists. So back in 2011, governing body made a general delegation to the chief executive, and that provides the authority to staff to do everything that staff do every day in their jobs. And that note in the allocation table is just an explanation of that. What we're talking about in this report is the allocation of decision-making responsibility in a governance sense as between governing body and local boards.
Yes, I understand all that. I just suppose I was struck by what I saw as the sweeping powers, or the fact that seemed in layman's terms to have taken away everything else we were talking about. Last question, do we review that at any time? You said it was put in place not so long ago. Are we going to have another look at it sometime and see if we want to change the wording and limit it to some extent?
So there, I think the last time it was reviewed was in 2015, I think, when the financial limit on that delegation was changed. But there are a number of limits that apply, and those are set out in the Chief Executive's delegation register. And I'm happy to speak to you offline with further information about that if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Love to learn that stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. John, I've got a question from my local board, and they were questioning the marina bit. They've asked if, where it talks about marina management, is that governance over council-owned marinas or governance extended to council, and does not include governance extended to council-controlled land that may provide access to private marinas? Can you just clarify whether it is council marinas, and if it's council land and private marinas, does that stay with local boards or stay with governing body?
So thanks, Chair. The proposal here is for all of the actual council-owned or marinas, or where there is a lease, including leases. So that's the three Central City ones, Hobsonville, Gulf Harbour, Half Moon to be governing body. So situation with Orake is neither of those. So yeah, that's the answer.
Great, thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, team. Just question for you, Megan. I'm not sure whether they do need changing, but the terms of reference for the various committees, considering democratic accountability was one of the big so-called drivers for this, and there's responsibilities coming into the governing body as a whole, of course, one would expect that policy and planning and maybe another committee would get bits and bobs here. Are the terms of reference in need of updating, or can they accommodate the landing of these new responsibilities? And when would we, if they do need updating, when would we know, what parts of Eke Panuku's work land where, etc.?
I was just going to give a general response around, under normal circumstances, every 3 years, so after an election, the mayor will usually suggest and put forward to the new governing body the committee structure, how many they are, what they deal with, and all the terms of reference that go into that. So there will clearly and definitely be one in, 6 months, 5 months' time, post-October. We do have the opportunity, though, to make changes as needed, and of course, in this term, kind of about 18 months in or so, there were some changes to committee structure and delegations as well. So there is an opportunity over time between those 3 years to make changes. I'm just looking to John and Alistair as to whether there are any particular changes required to any governing body terms of reference as part of this?
I don't think so, through the chair, that existing delegations would cover the activities that, instead of going to the board of, say, Ike Panuku, though, they would slot into probably policy and planning, and oversight of performance would sit with the governing body.
So something like regional regen program, that would fall into the policy and planning committee.
Different aspects, so decisions around which parts of the region that you were looking to potentially add to the program, that would seem to be a classic to sit with policy and planning. Decisions around how much to invest in those activities would sit with the governing body through the usual budgeting processes.
I think it'd be really good to understand how it does land in the governance space, because this was the premise, remember? This was all about democratic accountability. And if we don't understand how it lands here, where you make the decisions, because I currently do not, then we're in lots of hoopla on the change and bringing Ike Panuku in, but we don't quite know how it lands for us to exercise governance accountability. And I don't think we can make any assumptions that the terms of reference actually satisfied. Now, I can understand that going forward, there's a review post-election, and that's not far away, and in the interim, it can be dealt with by the governing body meeting itself. But there is, in my view, a need to address that. Otherwise, it's lip service to democratic accountability.
Through the chair, I'm just having a quick look at the current terms of reference for policy and planning, for example. It does specifically list city centre and waterfront development, regeneration and redevelopment programs. So that particularly is the policy, the setting of direction, all of that kind of thing. The Transport and Infrastructure Committee may also have delegations when it comes to perhaps delivery, if there's any decisions required around delivery of infrastructure. So look, I think that that is clearly captured in the current terms of reference. You make a very good point, and I will work with the team just to ensure that there's nothing significant excluded in that. And clearly, if we do need to make some changes, we would need to work through the Mayor's office. But at this stage, it looks as though it's covered from my perspective.
Okay, but that's because I'm asking the question, and we're being I would appreciate it if we knew this as we embarked on it. That's what I'm just highlighting, say, regeneration as an example, Chair, and I won't labour this, Chair, I'll wrap it up. But if you look at economic development, where does that sit now? I don't want to see a situation where disparate parts of an entity, Ike Panuku, come in and then there's a bit here and a bit here, and a Tātaki is a bit here and a bit here, in terms of economic development. Then there needs to be an understanding how it lands for decision making. That's the point I'm making, and I'm not confident that we've actually canvassed that. We're reacting to it.
I understand your point. Thank you.
I think
we'll
through the chair, the current committee structure, the policy decisions about what you want the organisation to achieve happen in policy and planning, and the funding and performance monitoring happen in the governing body, and that would apply to the new functions coming in.
Thanks all.
Councillor Hills.
Oh no, it was more a comment that the not the economic development part, that is an issue, but the others, my understanding, were completely under policy and planning, and we were sadly planning on bringing some of the possible locations and stuff last year, and Councillor Dalton and I were working with Ike Panuku on that, and then it got stalled because of this whole process. So my understanding that all still is very clear under the terms of reference. It wasn't a question, it was just a comment, but funding is obviously not sitting with us.
Okay, I think that's all questions, is that correct? Moved by Councillor Henderson, second by Councillor Leone from the ex-local boards. I'll ask you gentlemen to step back, please. Any comments? happy to take it to the vote then. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, we move now to item 16.